Who's the bigger threat, the far left or the far right? Now, the question is hard to, it's hard to quantify what's actually worse. Obviously, when you turn on CNN or talk to someone on the left, they're going to say, we have a growing threat from the far right in this country. However, you talk to other people and they'll say, but Antifa is engaging in widespread acts of violence. And hold on, full stop. I don't think this is necessarily, one thing I always call out is they're both bad. I get it. I do think the far right is more lethal and more dangerous, and we should focus on that. We have this story from Pluralist, though. There's a reason why I asked this question. Leaked FBI report shows left-wingers are a bigger threat than white supremacists. First, the big problem here is that left and right seemingly don't mean anything anymore. That's something we need to consider, because what they're actually talking about is black identity extremists, who are essentially the alt-right, but black. They believe the same thing. They want to establish a black homeland. They target white people. It's the same thing. And we've seen these attacks. Interestingly, the Anti-Defamation League does still refer to black identity extremism as left-wing. Now, here's the problem with the question. How is it that you can take somebody who wants an ethno-state and will get violent to do it and believes in the superiority or the importance of securing a homeland of their own race? I don't necessarily want to say they're supremacists. But how is it that you can take that person and then change the color of their skin and it becomes left or right wing? That makes literally no sense. The guy in El Paso was talking about universal basic income and universal health care and other left-wing things, and he sounded more like a Bernie supporter than a Trump supporter, if anything. But, as many have pointed out, because of his racial identity beliefs, people are calling that right-wing. And I gotta say, I just don't even know how to quantify this anymore. Listen, sometimes we refer to right-wing to refer to economics, like laissez-faire capitalism versus socialism. Sometimes it's literally just a tribal moniker. The right, the left, doesn't really mean much. Sometimes it refers to progressivism versus traditionalism. I can't tell you what it means because apparently it also means white and black. So I don't know. What I will say, however, check out this story. Leaked FBI report shows left-wingers are a bigger threat than white supremacists. And it's interesting because, as I mentioned, it talks about black identity extremists. But it goes on to talk about the FBI isn't too worried about white supremacy, calling it a medium threat. So actually, let's read through this. And I have the core story here. It's from the Young Turks. The reason I was planning on actually doing something with this report because I find it interesting, but as you guys know, I use a third-party rating agency to determine the veracity and honesty. The Young Turks are a commentary channel. I don't know how honest this stuff is. And I'll stress, I always go to the source material too. And the point of this video is I'm actually going to call out Pluralist, fact-checking systems, the Young Turks. But I also want to make sure I stress the left-wing view of the same story is essentially that the FBI is downplaying this and Trump is tying their hands. We have this other story. Trump's DOJ had shocking report on growing terror threat from white supremacists. Who do you believe and how do we navigate this? I gotta tell you, I don't know, but I will say this. I know that Styx Hexenhammer, if you're familiar with his commentary, I think he's a good dude. He made a video saying that he disagrees with me on the potential for a coming civil war, or outright saying it's amplified. I haven't gone through I skimmed it and but I disagree. I think we're on a train that can't be stopped. I think we're headed towards that cliff. So let's read a little bit about this, and I want to see what they think about white supremacy. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address. However, I don't normally say this, but a lot of people don't seem to know I have 3 channels on YouTube. So I produce 5 segments on this channel every day, youtube.com/timcastnews. I have another channel, youtube.com/timcast. And if you haven't subscribed there, that's where I talk about the bigger main story of the day. So, the impeachment against Trump. I have 6 segments, whichever one is like the biggest groundbreaking, that goes to the main channel. And these are kind of like runoff segments. So subscribe there if you haven't already, because that will be at 4 p.m. But let's read about this. They write, when it comes to the supposed scourge of white supremacy, by contrast, the FBI identified only a, quote, medium threat. The agency noted that white supremacist groups are in long-term decline and predicted that their membership will continue to fall throughout 2020. The FBI further judges ongoing attrition of national organized white supremacy extremist groups will continue over the next year, yielding a white supremacy extremist movement primarily characterized by locally organized groups, small cells, and lone offenders. Also flagged as security threats were animal rights and environmental extremists, along with Islamist terrorists and abortion extremists. So here's what I want to say. That's been my assessment. You know, there was a big boost towards the alt-right in 2016 until people realized what the alt-right was. A lot of people thought alt-right meant like anti-establishment conservative. They thought it meant like new populist conservative. No, you were wrong. And a lot of people started saying alt-right and doing all these things, not realizing they were literally posting things in line with white nationalists. And then I guess, Richard Spencer did the thing where he raised the glass and said, "Hail Trump," and all that stuff. And then people threw up the Roman salute. And there you have it. The alt-right has always been about that, and a lot of people didn't realize it and got roped into it. But I bring this up because since then, they've been on the complete decline. Nobody likes them. Nobody wants to associate with them. Their numbers are presumably dwindling, and that's what I see. I don't see a growing threat. I do see growing desperation, which means we got to pay attention to the crazies because as they dwindle, they become dangerous and violent. But here's the bigger picture, and this is the most important takeaway. I hope. Anybody who's left the video already is going to miss the most important point about the threat of what we could consider to be left-wing, I guess, or black identity extremism. Did you know that in Chicago, there's a mass shooting there are mass shootings all the time? It's like 800 people are shot and killed. I was in Chicago a couple of years ago, and I was doing a video on night crawling, which is when journalists go out at night and chase, stories that people are asleep for, and it's a lot of crime stuff. I think we ended up seeing 5 murders in one night. 5 murders. I don't think any of them were mass shootings, although there was one where it was like 2 guys ended up getting killed because someone jumped at the house and fired into the house. But mass shootings happen all the time in Chicago. Somebody from somebody, for whatever reason, there's a bunch of different reasons, will show up to a group like at a barbecue and just start firing into the crowd, shooting several people, injuring and killing many people. We don't talk about these, and no one seems to care. And that's been one of the big things for me. I've actually interviewed activists in Chicago. I did an interview with this woman who believes we should have gun rights legally and registered, and the city needs to do something about the illegal guns. And she said, we got to be specific. It's the illegal guns that are the problem, not the people who are buying guns legally and, protecting their families. So the city is focusing on the wrong things. But here's the main point, the most important takeaway. When you realize the violence in Chicago, the threat to police officers, the fact that in Chicago, cops can get shot and they do target white cops, this is what I think we're not seeing. When the media says a white supremacist went into a building and shot 20 people, it's like, oh my God, that's crazy. That's insane. It's the same thing when a black identity extremist in Chicago shows up and starts shooting at a bunch of people. We had a story recently where a guy was shooting at people saying, "I don't like white people in my neighborhood." The main point is the media doesn't cover what's been going on in Chicago and Baltimore for decades. They don't cover it. And it's mostly because it's not newsworthy. Been there, done that. We know Chicago is called Chirac because of the gun violence. But then you have to consider all of the black identity extremism is ignored and not considered a major incident. And I don't know why, but the ADL should have a giant red spot over Chicago for how many mass shootings occur there. But they don't consider it to be that. A lot of these mass shootings in Chicago are for no reason. It's just like one dude had beef with another dude, so he goes up and he just lays waste to people at a barbecue. And I think the other thing too is that they use handguns usually. So a lot of the mainstream, news is like, oh no, someone had a rifle, that makes it, more deadly. But these incidents in Chicago happen all the time, and they are mass shootings in that 4 or more people will be shot. But the media doesn't care about what's going on in Chicago and Baltimore. They care about the hot button issues, and then they get mad when the FBI says white supremacists are on the decline. They get mad when they say black identity extremism is on the rise. Right? You've got the rise of all of these identitarian movements on the left that are going unchecked. Conservatives today will say, in uncertain terms, like Steve King, removed from all his committees, that is not acceptable. People voted for you, fine, but we're not going to let you be in these committees. Ilhan Omar comes up, left-wing identitarian, says a bunch of crazy things, and they say, we're not going to denounce her. And therein lies the problem. Antifa is violent and is dangerous. Black identity extremists are violent and dangerous. Sean King, who recently called for terror runs with no repercussions on Twitter, calling for it, encouraging it. Reza Aslan calls for the eradication. It just keeps going. So I'd have to say, I'm not surprised the FBI is more concerned about left-wing ideology, although they are specifically talking about black identity extremism, which I don't even understand how you quantify left and right anymore. But the point is, from where I sit, I think we can recognize the nuance in the conversation. I don't care why you're an extremist. Extremists are bad. So we shouldn't say, we need to focus on white supremacy. No, we need to focus on armed lunatics who are buying guns and plotting attacks. I don't care why. I don't care how. If you are planning to hurt a bunch of people, regardless of your ideology, we need to make sure you're not doing, like, we can stop you before you do that. Now, the FBI is saying there's a growing black identity extremist movement, and there are people on Twitter, verified, hundreds of thousands of followers, I'm not going to name, who refer to themselves as black identity extremists. They're the same thing as the alt-right, but they're not white. They believe in the same things. And it's only growing on the left because the left won't call it out. When you see people like Sean King lie and encourage this stuff, they don't care. They just let it happen. So it's going to get worse. So the original story comes from the Young Turks. Credit to the Young Turks for publishing the story. However, I'm not sure if I can trust the Young Turks because it's mostly progressive activists who are actively trying to sway the Democratic Party in politics. So if they're going to do a report, TYT investigates, but the principles of the company are trying to alter the Democratic Party by any means necessary. I shouldn't say that. That's a bit hyperbolic. But if they're willing to use these tactics and Justice Democrats and brand new Congress and all that stuff, I'm not going to trust you're putting out honest information. I'm just not going to do it. Now, there are people coming out, and there are stories, it's important to point out. There's a lot of stories about former law enforcement saying their hands are being tied and they can't go after these people. And then we get the partisan divide. So who do you trust? I honestly don't know. And I think that it's a pointless question, and I'll leave it there. I don't care. You're a white supremacist? You want to go commit an act of violence against a bunch of people? Stop them. You're a black identity extremist? You want to go commit violence? Stop them. What I'm concerned about is, if black identity extremists are a growing threat, and they're in Chicago and Baltimore, and they are shooting people and shooting cops, and the media is not reporting it, and then they're acting like white supremacy is a serious problem when the FBI says they're dwindling, that's a serious problem. It is. Look, if we just say, you know what, we're gonna remove left and right from the equation, we're just gonna go after people we think are violent, I think we're good, right? No. Because, of course, it's about the political tribe, and it's about people pushing their tribe to be the winners. So naturally, you're going to see a lot of people, the FBI actually says this. We don't investigate ideology. The FBI declined to address the leaked report on record, but a spokesperson pointed pluralist toward officials' testimonies in those hearings. In an appearance before the Senate Judiciary Committee last month, Director Christopher Wray said that many of the domestic terrorists the FBI arrested in 2019 were affiliated with white supremacy, but he explained that the agency does not police ideas, even hateful ones. It simply fights crime. We only investigate violence, he said. We don't investigate extremism. We don't investigate ideology. We don't investigate rhetoric. It doesn't matter how repugnant, how abhorrent, or whatever it is. And there you go. So there's a fair point. If that's true, and they're only and most of those they arrested are white supremacists, then it's fair to say that white supremacists have a higher propensity towards these acts of extremism. But I think we can avoid the posturing and the politicking and just say, let's just target criminals and violence. And I'll start by saying this. For obvious tribal reasons, Chicago and Baltimore get ignored. And when Trump calls it out, he's called a racist and all this other nonsense. I don't care. Look, I think it's stupid what the media is doing, but Chicago and Baltimore have serious problems that need to be solved, and no amount of ignorance, ignoring the problem, or acting like it doesn't matter is going to solve anything. So perhaps the media there should be a news cycle dedicated to fixing Chicago. I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment will be coming up at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you all then.